And I'll look to the municipal clerk to let me know when we're streaming. Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting for Tuesday, October 15th, 2024. And I'll turn to Dr. Cottle for the Land Acknowledgement.
Thanks, Mayor Krausert. I spent the last 5 days in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, the traditional home of the Menominee, Dakota, and Anishinaabe people. It's also a place where I grew up and spent a lot of time as a child. And there's a reservation right in my home community. Many of the people who still live there were my good friends and classmates and teammates when I was growing up. And at the time, I didn't know or understand the history that their parents faced in terms of residential schools. The story is very similar in that part of the US as it is to here in Canada. And I was really struck being back there and seeing some of those people and spending a little bit of time on reserve and talking about truth and reconciliation in Canada and the work that's been done, and having a new understanding and appreciation for things that happened or conversations that I had when I was a young person and a student, and the importance of not having context and understanding history for making sense of your world. And so I want to apologize to those people who I had relationship with at the time for not really understanding the depth of the challenges they were facing in a way that I have now more perspective on. While I was there, I also read The Marrow Thieves, which is a young adult fiction by Sherry Demeline, who's a Georgian Bay Métis author from Canada. And it's a book set in the 21st century about a dystopian world after the ravages of climate change have affected our planet, and what ultimately ends up happening to Indigenous people once again, despite history and what we understand, at the hands of white people. It's not truth, but it is a potential truth and a warning. And so it really just was a very reflective time for me in terms of thinking about truth and reconciliation and our commitment as an organization and a community to continuing to try to do that work and live in right relations. And so I'm really honored to be able to start meetings with all of you in a way that centers us and reminds us of history so that we can continue to learn and commit to being better actors in the future. So with that, I'm really happy to say that we want to acknowledge the land that we are on, which is the traditional land of Treaty 7 people, which includes the Stoney Nakoda, the Bearspaw, Chiniki, and Goodstoney First Nations, the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Métis Region 4 Battle River District. Like many of my coworkers and all of you, I'm committed to living in right relations and truth and reconciliation, and honor the people who came before us and were good stewards.
Thank you very much. Now turning to item A2, the agenda for today's meeting. Any changes? Seeing none, I move approval of the agenda for October 15th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now for item B1, we have a delegation from the Government of Alberta, the Wildlife Fence Project.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, Council. Many members of Council have had questions about the wildlife fencing that will be installed along the Trans-Canada Highway. So to give Council an understanding of where that project is at and have a chance to ask questions about that, we're joined today in person by James Harrion. He's the project manager for the Wildlife Watch project, and there are a few virtual attendees as well on his team, and he'll be introducing them to you in a minute. I just wanted to say James comes to us from Lethbridge, and I'm just really appreciative of his commitment to this project and his willingness to make the trip here today in person to be able to present this project to you. So I'll hand it over to James now.
Mr. Harrion, welcome to Canmore, welcome to Council, and we look forward to our Committee of the Whole, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Okay, thanks for having me here. I'll get started. So I'm James Harrion. I'm the project sponsor for the project, and online we have, I don't know if they're muted or not, but we have Darren Davidson, our regional director, Stephen Lagares, our environmental specialist, and Maria Dukowski, our senior wildlife biologist with EPA. Oh, maybe Darren's not on.
If you ask them to
Yeah, I'm here.
turn their cameras on, then we can see.
Okay.
You have to do that in the mic.
Oh, Stephen, can you hear that? Can you guys put your cameras on? I guess you guys have.
Yeah, I've got my camera on and I can hear you clearly.
Looks like two have their camera on. If Darren's there, he just needs. Oh, there's Darren right there. There we go. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
So I'll start the presentation. I have kind of a couple slides with the program and then mosaic of the project overview and then time for some questions. Okay. Historically, animal vehicle collision mitigation was limited due to a number of issues. In close collaboration with the environment and protected areas, Alberta Transportation and Economic Corridors has developed the Alberta Wildlife Watch program to solve this issue. The program's objectives is to improve the safety of the traveling public while reducing the impacts our highways have on local wildlife populations. The GOA and our contractors use a smartphone application to collect animal carcass data province-wide. Once the data is collected, it is then analyzed in our AVC analytic tool, and finally the results are then used in our mitigation planning process. Tech, in collaboration with our environment and protected areas, has developed and released a series of guidelines that helps guide our consultants through the mitigation planning process. These guidelines take into consideration the contributions of our academic partners and industry experience in order to help us develop effective mitigation. These guidelines allow tech to complete not only standalone projects, but integrate mitigation planning into highways and bridge projects all across Alberta. The most cost-effective method to mitigating AVCs is to install wildlife exclusion fencing and adapt or retrofit the existing road infrastructure to provide safe wildlife passage under the highway. Retrofit entails minor improvements to bridge structures such as grading paths or benches under the bridge to help wildlife movement. One of the strengths of the AWW program is that not only allows us to easily collect data and identify collision-prone locations that warrant mitigation, but also monitor it once constructed at no additional cost by simply continuing to collect carcass data in the area. So I'll stop for a second and share the drawings. So our project, the Bow River to Banff East Gate, spans from the Banff East Gate to the Bow River. And I don't know. It might be tough to navigate this. So we tie into the existing fence at the Banff National Park, and then go east, all within the highway right-of-way. Our project fencing also goes on the, I guess depending on how you look at the highway side of the Legacy Trail. And then we have various wildlife guards, which are, in all intents and purposes, like a cattle guard that's oversized to mitigate wildlife from being able to circumvent it. And then we tie into bridge structures or go underneath them where possible. And then we tie into the other bridge structures that are along the highway alignment. And then we also travel up Highway 1A a little bit to a terminus. where the project will end there and future projects will tie into once they're available. And then we tie into the Bow River Bridge, and then that's the kind of the project overview. If anyone has any questions.
Yes, thanks very much. And just so you know, we're flipping around as we have a large version of this, so that, because it's hard to see on the screen. So I do appreciate you walking us through that. Couple of questions. First of all, I do see that there's some standard wildlife guards, as sometimes the roads have to be crossed, and obviously you don't want the animals to cross there as well. Some of these wildlife guards are really close to residences. And so I was wondering if there's anything that can be done to reduce the noise levels, and so that you're not getting the boom, 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 boom all day long. Is there anything that can be done in that regard?
Yeah, Stephen, do you want to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the wildlife guards are placed at areas where the vehicles are moving at slower speeds in order to help reduce that, reduce the noise output of vehicles going over it. They are unfortunately a necessary evil, as you had mentioned, in order to prevent wildlife from entering the highway. They're a little bit larger than the ones that you would typically see as cattle guards, but it has been contemplated, and the receptors, so the residences, have been considered in that alignment choice of where those guards are being placed in order to minimize the potential impacts of noise.
Is there any sort of treatment that can be done with them, like putting, you'll often have the pieces of metal that go straight across, that if you can hit them with your tires, it's a smoother crossing for you, but I think doesn't take away from the effectiveness of the crossing. Will there be stuff like that applied to these wildlife guards?
Those strips have been shown to have, especially more persistent species such as bears, are able to use those features to climb in. So we do look to minimize them on our standard drawing for them, for our guidance drawing for them. We do have those strips. They're staggered, so one side of your tire will hit the round bar, the other will be on that, in order to help reduce that potential intrusion rate of especially more stubborn species. But they are there.
If it does end up posing a problem and it's determined that some modifications could be made, or is there something that could be done afterwards if the noise is really a problem?
Yeah, we can. I think we're comfortable monitoring. We do have standards related to noise impacts, and so post-construction monitoring. If it's determined that there's an issue at that point, then we'll take a look at potential mitigative actions.
One other question I have, and I know it's been a topic of conversation in the community.
Sorry, whoever is speaking, I can't quite hear
Sorry.
you.
Yeah, go ahead. One other question that I had, and I know it's been a topic of a conversation in the community. Very grateful about the wildlife exclusionary fence. Obviously, what it's preventing are especially the elk crossing the highway, but that's because they were needing to get from one side of the valley to the other. Wonder if you could speak to how the connectivity issues to ensure that the wildlife are able to still cross as they're able, perhaps not wherever they're able, of course, because that's a problem. And what, I think it was, is it Maria that is the environmental? Yeah, and what the biologist's point of view might be on the sufficiency of crossing opportunities for wildlife.
So I'll take the first bit of that question and ask my colleague Maria to step in. So the wildlife exclusion fencing is expected to guide wildlife to the existing safe crossing opportunities, as James had mentioned. When considering the Bow Valley, specifically the project limits and 10 kilometers on either side, we're already meeting the industry practice for crossing frequency for large, medium, and small-bodied animals. Maria, did you have anything to add to that? Maria, if you're speaking, you're muted.
There, now can you hear me? Thanks, Stephen. I guess I would just reiterate what you've just said, and adding to that any wildlife mitigations that are constructed along the highway will be monitored by Fish and Wildlife Stewardship in collaboration with NGOs or other partners that are on the project.
So I do see, I mean, the pedestrian underpass, it looks like there's a channeling there. That, I have to admit, that causes a great concern because of where it causes the animals to move through on either side. I see that there's a natural one around the train, although I don't know if that's also the best solution. I mean, I guess my question is, just because there is an opening that they could potentially go through, does that meet does that mean that they should go through?
So with regards to the pedestrian underpass, we have excluded that at the request of municipal staff as a crossing opportunity, as it is not the intent of that. We are isolating the highway. The safety project here is to isolate the highway. With regards to potential human-wildlife conflict or coexistence, I have spoken to the Human-Wildlife Coexistence Roundtable about a year ago. And that I think would be, if that persists as an issue, that would be the forum with which to discuss how to move that forward, for which I believe the town of Canmore is a member of that roundtable, as well as a working group. With regards to the rail infrastructure, there is a large grassed area between the rail and Highway 1A that I would expect that wildlife could safely move through. With regards to the rail line itself, we're restricted by our mandate here, which is the highway, not the rail line. And I would suggest if there is any potential conflicts, that the rail owner be engaged.
It's not shown on the map, but further to the, I guess it's to the north or the east, along the 1A, how far does that go? Because I just see that there's a potential of elk moving, if they're moving south to north or east to west, they could get just trapped and then they're forced to go down into the town site. Because I don't know if there's any crossings up that way.
So the fencing along Highway 1A extends for about 1 kilometer. There is another project that has begun the design phase that will take that fence and extend it further east and provide a purpose-built wildlife crossing structure. I believe in the presentation that James provided, there is a link to a project website that gives details on all of the wildlife mitigation projects within the Bow Valley.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I'll turn to Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a bit of a follow-up, because I don't think that I really understood the answer to your initial question around the need for crossing structures along this stretch of highway for wildlife to get from one side to the other. Am I correct that the answer was that this design meets the standards for small and medium-sized crossings? Is that what was?
It meets industry practice for, which is a crossing frequency opportunity of between 2 and 6 kilometers for small, medium, and large.
Small, medium, and large wildlife? Or
Correct.
small, okay. And how far is this entire stretch of work?
Approximately 10 kilometers.
10 kilometers. So the industry practice is to have one every 2 to 6 kilometers?
Correct.
And we have a stretch of 10 kilometers. And where are the, so then where are the structures for meeting the industry? Are they the jump outs?
No, so within Banff National Park, within a couple hundred meters, there's a wildlife underpass that is just on the other side of the gate. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so you mean the G7 underpass?
No, that one, well, might be their G7 one. We have another one to the east of Canmore, but they call it the East Gate Wildlife Underpass. So there is one there. There is an existing bridge culvert structure in the Harvey Heights area. Where Highway 1A loops underneath Highway 1, as well as at the Bow River, they'll be able to cross underneath that bridge.
Okay. Now, the elk choose to live in our town to avoid predation. Habitat selection to avoid predation, I believe, is the term. And so the stretch of highway that's directly adjacent to the services of the town of Canmore and the overpasses is where the elk tend to cross. They're not going outside town to find ways. So is the idea that they're going to follow this fence line to the Bow River or another underpass?
Yeah, the wildlife fencing, before I hand it off to my colleague Maria, the wildlife fencing is intended to guide wildlife to safe crossing opportunities. In this case, yes, Highway 1A as well as the Bow River. And Maria, did you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, no, I'd reiterate what Stephen just said. It is expected that it will take some time for wildlife to learn where to go, but that these things are opportunities for them to learn how to cross safely in other areas, and that we would expect that they would start crossing in these other sites, even if they weren't their preferred location currently.
We have a situation where there are a number of apartment buildings along the highway and the residents cut across the highway and they cut through the fences that we put up. What are your plans to mitigate that?
Unfortunately, wherever we put wildlife exclusion fencing, we do face vandalism. The department's standard response to that is fix it as quickly as we can once the vandalism has been identified. We have seen on other stretches of fencing in the Calgary area, the vandalism tails off over time as people get, essentially people get dissuaded from doing that as we're simply repairing it as fast as they're cutting it.
Councillor Graham.
Thank you to all you. I think we're all very excited to have this project happening, and the devil's definitely in the details. So thanks for bearing with us as we've got some questions here. But I was wondering if wildlife movement is deterred in a negative way, is there funding to support an actual wildlife overpass through that 10 kilometers?
So as Maria, the senior wildlife biologist, had said, her ministry will monitor the mitigations. If an issue is identified in the future, the government of Alberta will evaluate it at that time and proceed similar to other program needs.
I was wondering if I could talk about the design of the actual fence. And in Banff National Park, we've seen bears climbing over the fence and getting onto the highway that way. I'm wondering what sort of mitigations are in place to help deter that.
So where climbing species are present, we work very closely with Parks Canada as well as the other Canadian jurisdictions that are building wildlife exclusion fencing. One of the things that we have designed and where climbing species are a target species is a cantilevered component. So essentially at the top of the fence, you have a return arm hanging out back towards the habitat side. So it should help reduce the number of incursions for bears that are trying to climb that fence, as they'd have to go back over their own head. But that is also part of that, the ongoing learning in this industry, as obviously Parks Canada has had some challenges this last summer. It's part of the ongoing learning as we deploy more and more of these fences.
Thank you. I was wondering, as wildlife do end up on the highway, and this will reduce this dramatically, but some wildlife will end up on the highway. What funding is available to, I guess not even funding, but what staffing resources are available to help manage that when that does happen?
So as part of the design, you'll notice on your mosaics there are what are called wildlife jump outs.
Yeah.
There are structures that are integrated into the fence that allow, it's an earthen ramp on the highway side and a concrete Lego block wall on the habitat side. So it'll allow wildlife to find these structures, climb up on the highway side, jump down into the habitat side. But when they look back at the structure, it maintains its effective height on the structure, or like looking towards the highway from nature. So the Parks Canada has shown very good effectiveness of wildlife escape features such as these ones, and so they'll be installed. I believe there's a whole bunch of them, especially near areas where there may be intrusions at wildlife guards or at wildlife guards for this, and then the at-grade fence end on Highway 1A. So there are opportunities, and they're frequent along the alignment to allow wildlife to escape themselves.
And should they not escape themselves, is there a staff resource to help persuade them in those directions?
Yeah, I can maybe answer that. We've had fencing down in Crowsless Pass on Highway 3, and sometimes the wildlife officers help out. Sometimes even the public was even there. We don't have a contractor available 100% of the time, especially in the wintertime. We want them in a snowplow. So there's various different, I guess, means to kind of shoo them off the road. But the wildlife guys seem to be the best support for that on the highway. That kind of answers your question.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Worship, and thanks for making the trip down to the library. Question, there's parts of the fence along the Legacy Trail, there's other parts of fencing in Banff National Park where it's electrified. Is there an electrification component to this fencing that we're seeing here in these maps?
Not in this portion of the fencing.
Okay. And if that was to be added down the road, is there like some sort of justification that would qualify for that?
Stephen, can you maybe answer that one?
So as Darren Davidson had mentioned, we don't have dedicated staff. Systems like the one that Parks Canada has for electrification do take constant and consistent maintenance to keep working. So instead of electrification, what we focused on is design choices such as that return arm to help dissuade climbers, because the electrification along the fence is what Parks Canada is using to dissuade bears from climbing the fence. Whereas we're choosing a little bit more of a physical approach.
Okay, and with, like, I see there's some detailing in the document we have here with regards to the wildlife guard crossings. Do you guys have any, like, on your files right now, perhaps more images of these proposed wildlife jump outs? Like
Yes,
the
we can
size of them,
provide.
the shape of them, the scope of them.
Yeah, we've got similar drawings that we definitely can provide for the wildlife escape features, the wildlife jump outs. This was just the image included here was to provide context with regards to the wildlife guards, but jump outs we do have similar style drawings that we can provide.
Okay, and just last question here. We do have our Palliser lands, which we intend on densifying over the next couple of years to quite a significant bump up in the population. And at some point, we probably will need to create some sort of pedestrian underpass or overpass. Are there any sort of design considerations with regards to this current fence that you guys are putting in that we should know about before we undergo that sort of initiative?
I don't think so. I think our fence would be flexible if there's some kind of change. The fence could either be tied into that structure or vice versa, kind of worked around it.
Okay.
The fence could.
I can maybe add, James, if it's an overpass, we expect it to be long enough that future expansion of the highway is accommodated. Great. So underpasses typically are easier to accommodate that now and then you add on later, but just FYI.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Faubert.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that having fencing installed from the national park gates to the Bow River is a huge win and something that we've been really pushing for. So I'm really grateful that everyone is here today and that you're willing to answer our questions around sort of future mitigations as well. One thing that I was curious about is the monitoring. And will there be monitoring of the elk themselves with radio collars to understand their movement relative to the fence and if they're adapting to how we want them to move? Is that part of the plan?
I'd defer that to Maria.
In regards to the monitoring part, we're still exploring the best options for a long-term monitoring program, seeing that collars are shorter lived, 1 or 2 years that we might get per collar per animal, and just based on cost and time that goes into that. There's other methods that can get us some of that information long-term without putting collars out. So we're exploring sort of the cost benefits of different types of monitoring programs that could provide that information.
I don't see any further questions, and so I just want to extend my thanks for Mr. Harrion for being here in person and for the other three of you for joining us virtually. I hope that you hear both the balance that we are very grateful that this project is happening, and our questions go to, as council, we think of what could potentially be a concern that arises, and so, the more that can be taken care of or thought of in the at the front end, then hopefully we have less problems at the back end. And so, so much of wildlife connectivity is important to the community. Canmore is one of the founders of the Human Wildlife Coexistence Roundtable, and we do sit on it both in the guiding roundtable as well as the technical working group. And so it's of absolute vital importance that whatever is used to solve one problem doesn't create a second problem or a larger problem. So I'm glad that there'll be some monitoring, and I hope that you take away the level of interest that we have to make sure that the fence works, not only protect wildlife and people on the highway, but also to make sure that we don't become a barrier for movement of the wildlife through implementing that one solution. So, and then there's also, making sure that the noise attenuation isn't a problem, and that that we do have the ability to deal with situations as they arise, such as an animal entering into the highway. So thank you for answering our questions. We are so much more knowledgeable about this now, and it's very much appreciated. And I do see Councillor Graham wanting to pop in for one more question.
Sorry, thank you, and I appreciate that, Your Worship. I was wondering about timing of the project, when it's going to start and when we can look at completion.
The plan for the project is to occur construction next year. So we're still finalizing the design and tender, and then hopefully having it out for next year construction.
Early 2025, late?
Summer 2025.
Okay, and then roughly a year, 2 years?
Probably a season, so it'll be done by fall of next year.
Wow, excellent. Thank you, sir.
Good question. Thank you, Councillor Graham. And once again, thank you for being here. I hope all of you have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to item C1, the minutes from the last meeting. Were there any errors or omissions? Okay, seeing none, I move approval of the minutes of September 17th, 2024, Committee of the Whole meeting as circulated. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. And now we're going to move to item D1, staff reports, Connect Downtown, options phase, what we heard. And Mr. Cairns, welcome to Committee of the Whole.
Thank you, Mayor Cressert. Hi, Council. Nice to be here. Pretty excited to take this one away and give you a little bit of an update on what we heard through our last round of engagement this past July and August on Connect Downtown. And Ben, I just need control of the screen sharing there. Thank you. Okay, I'll kick this off with a quick presentation summarizing a little bit of what we did through our summer engagement this past year and where we're at on the Connect Downtown project. I'll keep it brief, of course, because in the Committee of the Whole report today, page 20 to 54, we do have a very kind of extensive 34-page summary of what we heard, breaking down all the results. So this one will be, of course, a very high-level overview of some of the key takeaways and themes. Quick agenda, really brief refresher, what we're doing with this project, recap what we've done, including the engagement that happened this past summer, walk you through some of the key themes of what we heard and the results of that engagement, and then briefly just summarizing on, well, where do we go from here and what our next steps are. So what we're doing, the quick just refresher to bring everyone up to speed. Connect Downtown is the name we're giving to a planning project that's really focused on creating an area redevelopment plan for the town center. So this end product of Connect Downtown will be a document, it will be a statutory plan that will chart out the future vision and the supporting policies to get us there for downtown Canmore. The study area that this would apply to is sort of bounded by a few natural boundaries and key town assets and opportunity areas. So the study area stretches to the Spur Line connection in the north, Railway Avenue to the east, Fifth Avenue and Fifth Street to the south around Centennial Park, and then is bounded by the Bow River on the west. While this is the study area where policy changes would apply to, it does go without saying that we are examining the area beyond that because we are looking at, well, how do changes on one parcel or on one street link to areas beyond that, and making sure our entire downtown core is connected to the surrounding neighborhoods. So what have we done with Connect Downtown? You'll recall this is really a 4-phase project. We had our scoping phase late summer, early fall of 2023. And our first public facing phase was the visioning phase. So that spanned October through February 2024. And that was really focused on broad community engagement, listening, understanding community concerns, aspirations, hopes, and ideas for the future. From that vision phase, we pivoted into the options phase, saying, okay, well, with this vision in mind and what we're trying to work towards downtown, how can we go about getting there? What are some of our general policy directions we can look at doing? What do the land uses potentially look like? And so that phase stretched from February to September of this year. And that's the focus of the What We Heard report as well. So it's on the options phase of engagement. Since concluding that, we've now pivoted into the final phase. This is where we'll actually draft the ARP document itself. We'll refine the policy directions based on what we heard. We will draft the area plan, and we will go through another round of engagement on that in the new year before bringing it to council for the more formal community engagement process, like a public hearing. So our engagement approach for Connect Downtown has been multifaceted. We really wanted to focus on hearing from the community in a lot of different ways, and also hearing from those we don't typically hear from, such as younger adults, for example, that might be the ones living in downtown when this plan is actually realized in the future. So our visioning phase, as I mentioned, we did the really broad, diverse engagement to establish a common future. And then we wanted to make sure we had this sort of extra touch point or interim check-in with the community before going into the draft plan phase, where we could say, okay, well, with this vision in mind, we're thinking about a few different directions or avenues we can take to realize that vision. We want to have a pulse check with you and make sure we're on the right track for what that could look like before we go any further. With this done now, we're going to move into the draft plan phase. And when that document's drafted, we do anticipate another round of community engagement early in the new year. And that would be in addition to the public hearing process that would happen thereafter. So the key point here is the options phase was sort of an interim step where we just wanted to do an extra check-in beyond what we normally do before any directions were set in stone. So you saw the slide before. This is recapping what we did on the visioning phase. The key takeaway here is we used a lot of different tools, everything from engaging youth in some visioning exercises to young adults, doing programming downtown through the warm up and the cool down event in partnership with a folk festival, and then our more traditional engagement as well, public workshop, a stakeholder workshop, and online engagement. This was really successful. It ended up resulting in over 1,600 direct interactions with a really broad, diverse group of respondents, residents, and stakeholders. So it really set a good foundation for the options phase that built off of it. The output of that vision phase of engagement was a vision document. So it outlines what we could call a working vision statement, really defining what this future downtown is that we want to strive towards. Some of our core values that a future downtown should embody. 10 big ideas that reflect the more transformative ways we might change downtown in support of those values. And then at the end of that document was the detailed What We Heard report. So that vision document's important because it outlines sort of the foundational steps and the foundational direction, all the following processes we're going to follow in Connect Downtown. So if you want to think about the plan hierarchy, the visioning phase, you can see sort of laying the groundwork at the top. So kind of working on a bit of a vision, our core values, our big ideas for downtown. And then the options phase that we did in the summer was focusing on what we call the strategies. So looking at those values, looking at those big ideas and saying, okay, what are some actions or steps or decisions the town could take in support of at least one of those big ideas and those core values. So how are we actually going to get to this vision we outlined in the previous phase? And so if you want to see sort of how that all fits together, you can see on the left, we have that one single vision statement guiding the future downtown. We break that down into those 6 values that reflect what we care about, what our priorities are as a community. Then we break those values down and say, okay, well, here's some transformative ways we can help achieve that. And then we go to the more detailed level of the strategies and the area concept, outlining individual steps we can take. So in total, there were 59 strategies that we brought to the community for engagement, along with an area concept. And so that area concept that we brought to the community looked something like this. It basically outlines what we are considering as potential land uses in the future, what the street network would look like, and what our open space network would look like. So just at its core, some of the key strategies that we were considering is a fully pedestrianized Main Street. That would, of course, only happen when we redesign Main Street in the future, when its underground infrastructure is up for renewal. It wouldn't happen before then. But complemented by improvements to the overall street network to make sure it works better for everyone, but also improves vehicle flow as well. That street network is complemented by improvements to the open space network, the most notable one being a central plaza right in the heart of downtown connected to that pedestrianized space, and then also a potential expansion to Riverside Park to meet the growing needs of the community. On the land use side, you can see the buildings really range from 3 to 5 stories. That's reflecting what we felt was a really balanced approach, kind of building off the visioning phase and what we heard from the community last fall. Really at its core, though, it's about a 3-story form downtown. So it's not a housing or density at all costs approach. It's really about balance and respecting the character and the charm of the place. So a 3-story form throughout, but considering up to 4 only if it's going to be in exchange for some public benefits or amenities like affordable housing. So you'd only expect some of those locations to actually go to that height. And then in strategic spots like over on Railway Avenue, looking at opportunities for up to 5 stories in exchange for those community benefits as well. So that was just a draft initial concept that we wanted to bring to the community for feedback and was really the backbone of a lot of our engagement this past summer. So for the options phase, we again did a multi-pronged engagement approach. It ended up being 4 weeks in total, so a bit longer than what we typically do. And that was just being respectful of the fact that it was over summer. And while we don't typically engage over the summer, as I mentioned, we wanted to have this sort of extra touch point built in before we set any directions in stone, so to speak. That was really important to us. So we did do 4 weeks. We did online engagement throughout that entire period. And then that was complemented by, we wanted to do a mix of more passive engagement for people that wanted to meet the project in ways that worked for them and to build awareness, but then also more structured engagement as well. So we had pop-ups for 3 weeks straight, every single day available at Elevation Place. And then we had 3 staffed engagement sessions, 4 hours each, so 12 hours total within that to engage with the community, collect feedback, workshop some of these ideas. On the interest holder side of things, we did have 2 in-person interest holder workshops in that period, and then also a virtual interest holder workshop as well to expand the accessibility of those. So here you can just see some images of what those pop-ups looked like. So boards constantly present for the entire 3-week period at Elevation Place, but then complemented by actual staff sessions where we could engage with the community, collect feedback, throw ideas up on the board, and get a better feel of the nuance behind some of that feedback. Where are we heading that's working well, what's resonating, and what isn't, and what might we want to rethink. We got the word out through probably like our broadest distribution method that we've ever done. So we did the more traditional things like focusing on newspaper advertisements. We installed large signage on Main Street. We distributed our electronic newsletters, updated the website through various means, broad focus on social media posts. But then we went beyond that to get the word out further, and we focused heavily on even Mountain FM radio ads throughout the entire engagement period, and even did a direct mailer postcard that was distributed to over 5,000 addresses in Canmore. And the result of those efforts was pretty obvious and immediate, we realized. So as soon as the engagement period wrapped up and we tallied up all the results, we realized we had over 2,400 pieces of input. And it was from a really broad and diverse representation of the community and businesses. And it just absolutely blew us out of the water with how much we got through the online survey as well, with over 1,700 responses. So record-setting participation by far for anything that we've ever done on the planning side of things in Canmore. When we break that down, who we heard from, it was a really great turnout by residents, 88%, which is what we'd like to see, of course, and that also helps us understand what the resident opinion is rather than just the broader set of respondents. Over half of those residents worked in Canmore, And it was also similar to the visioning phase, a really diverse age group that we heard from, almost equal participation from every demographic from 26 and up. Good turnout from the business community as well, with over 144 survey respondents stating that they either owned or operated a business downtown in some capacity. And that brings us to the what we heard. So overall, the sentiment was positive. When we look at the 59 strategies we shared, and we just average those responses across all 59 strategies, we get this breakdown here. So the most common response was 39% for strongly agree. So over a third of all respondents strongly agreed with the strategies, followed by 27% somewhat agreeing, 13% were neutral, 9% somewhat disagree, and then 12% strongly disagree. So overall, very positive results. It is important to note, though, of course, that when we say this is overall, that is the average, and there is variance within that when we start to break it down on a finer scale. So encouragingly, 57 of the 59 strategies received a higher level of agreement from respondents than disagreement. But within that, there was variation. So for some of those, the majority of support was very minimal, just barely over, say, 50%, whereas for others, the overall level of agreement was up to 90% or higher. If we want to highlight, though, just a few of the strategies that received the most support, kind of more up to that 90% threshold, we saw a lot of positive feedback and support for this idea that, you know, downtown is a special place, its connection to the mountains is important, so we want to limit building heights to 3 stories along key corridors to preserve a little bit of that character and that access to sunlight and the mountain views. And that was from Main Street, 10th Street, and public spaces as what we defined as those key corridors. A lot of support as well for this idea that we want to develop design guidelines that ensure development really contributes to the area's unique mountain setting. We aren't looking to drastically pivot away from that downtown. Instead, we want to reinforce it. And then the third strategy with the most support was integrating natural elements and materials that are really reflective of Canmore's environment into the design of our parks or open spaces and trails. So natural materials like wood for our landscaping and our seating features, for example, rocks, boulders, logs, perhaps for play elements in our parks. So really building off that connection to the surrounding natural environment. And then when we pivot to the strategies that had the least amount of overall support, so 2 of those 59 didn't receive a majority of support, and those are the first 2 here. So while there was a lot of support for limiting building heights to 3 stories, we wanted to look at the opportunity to go beyond that for affordable housing or more energy efficient buildings, so up to 4 or 5 stories in key locations. That fell just short of the majority support. Similarly, we heard concerns around the idea of reducing parking requirements to help support more affordable housing options for those that don't actually own a vehicle or want to live downtown without a vehicle. The third bullet there, this was the third least supported. It did receive more support than non-support, but this was about strategically developing or repurposing some town assets, some town-owned land to help address community priorities or gaps downtown. And the main one of concern that arose in feedback from the community was the grass area named Eckloff Park, which is just north of 10th Street within the study area. When we look at the area concepts, that was that map I showed you with the land uses, the transportation network, the open spaces. Feedback was quite mixed on the land use, almost an equal distribution on the somewhat agree to the somewhat disagree side of things. And I think when we break that down and look at the open-ended feedback, it was really reflective of that idea of a lot of support for this level of 3-story buildings, but then some concern when we start to look at allowing beyond that. However, when we pivot to the transportation and the open spaces side of things, so the pedestrianization of Main Street, the improvements to our parks, the expansion of Riverside Park, we shifted more to a very positive overall takeaway of feedback from the respondents. 21% strongly agreeing, and 32% somewhat agreeing. Breaking down that, the survey results are all good, and it's a really helpful way to gauge the overall sentiment, but we wanted to do a bit of thematic analysis and see what arose. So from the interest holders, a lot of really strong support, I think we could say, was the sentiment, and not much concern for the strategies in the area concept. Key themes that were highlighted by interest holders was a support for the overall direction of the plan, so the area concept and the strategies, and a lot of support for the proposed building heights as well, or even suggestions that, for a town center, they don't go far enough, especially in the context of a housing crisis. Support as well for the idea of pedestrianizing Main Street in a way to make it really thrive in the future and compete with other commercial areas. Support and interest for this arts, culture, and heritage piece that's being folded into the plan. The idea of a central celebration plaza to really anchor community gathering spaces and events. A focus on mode shift and complete streets to make the streets work for everyone, including vehicles. Expanding Riverside Park was really identified as a common theme from interest holders as well. A really great way to help connect the heart of downtown better to the Bow River. And of course, it goes without saying, the interest holders were supportive of our focus on affordable housing through town land and incentives, and looping in a little bit of an environment and a sustainability lens as well. So just to illustrate what that looks like with some key quotes here to kind of reflect the sentiment, we have, happy to see Main Street as pedestrian use only. Good to have higher building stories or more affordable housing. Really appreciate including affordable housing within downtown. Higher densities and heights are foundational for street life outside of peak hours, which is a big focus of Connect Downtown. And then you see on the flip side, actually even telling us to go further, like in a housing crisis where housing is a human right, we should probably consider more than 3 or 4 stories. So that sort of highlights the mix of feedback there. Then when we pivot to the key themes from the public, we see a lot of overlap with the interest holders on the support side. So the public expressed a lot of interest or support for delivering affordable housing and using town land to do so downtown. The pedestrianization and walkability improvements were a common theme as well. If we want to make the network work for everyone, and if we want to reduce congestion, well, we need to focus on people who want to walk or bike being able to do so they don't have to get in their car and add to that congestion. Again, common theme, environmental sustainability strategies, working with that downtown, providing better amenities and open space improvements, limiting building heights, so kind of that 3-story cap along key corridors, preserving views where possible, focusing on community spaces, and then really strong theme was the idea that we're going to look at developing an intercept parking facility so that we can actually stop vehicles who are visiting from actually entering downtown and contributing to that congestion by having a one-stop parking facility just outside. And then we flip it to the themes of sort of general concern, building off what the positive was, the support for the 3 stories. Well, we heard concern for anything above and beyond that. A really key theme of concern that sort of is worth highlighting above others was the land use concept showed the potential for affordable housing on Eckloff Park, up to 4 stories in height, and that rose a lot of community concern. Also concerned for how any changes downtown could impact parking and vehicular movement and what it might mean for getting around or through the valley bottom. Potential impacts any change or development would have on wildlife or the environment. Change of character, and I think on the opposition, underpinning a lot of concerns was just, well, what is this going to cost and how are we going to fund it, with particular sensitivity around property taxes. Some quotes here as well to highlight the overall themes or distribution of responses. So on the one hand, some allowing more 5-story multifamily buildings and making that more successful, +1 for a pedestrian zone, a lot of excitement about Main Street being pedestrianized. And then on the flip side, though, you can see, well, opposition to low-cost housing downtown, or concerns about, well, how are we going to pay for this, or how much are my taxes going to go up? And if we just want to step back and take some observations away, just our reflections on the engagement, I think it was fairly obvious that we had really strong alignment on the future and the needs of downtown in the visioning phase. The community really expressed strong support for this idea of we want affordable housing, we want to reduce congestion, we want to connect to nature. But then when we move to the options phase and we show the realities around what that means to achieve that, that's where divergent views arise. When we face these tough choices, when we face these trade-offs like development for affordable housing, as an example, or needing to shift away from car-oriented development to reduce congestion on the streets. Similarly, the second takeaway was these area plans are complex documents. They cover a broad range of topics. They're going to take 30, 40, 50, 60 years to even be realized. And the planning process for those is a multi-year process. So it's really difficult to bring the same people along on this journey over multiple years and bring them in at each step of the way. But overall, that doesn't underpin, I think, what we could say was the success of it, which was huge turnout and an overall positive sentiment, even though on some specific aspects, feedback was more mixed. So where we go from here? So as I mentioned, the options phase was that sort of interim check-in with the community. So we're going to take that away, refine those directions, wrap up some final studies, and then through the fall and winter, we're drafting this area redevelopment plan and the document itself. Anticipate another round of public and stakeholder engagement once the draft plan is done in the winter, early 2025, and then bring that to council for consideration, which would be another round of formal engagement through a public hearing process. And thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cairns. Very much appreciate your presentation and all the effort. I appreciate the detailed what we heard report, and it's very interesting findings, and it's fantastic the number of people who are involved. Of course, if some ideas tick people off, that's a good way to get some extra people involved. And on that front, as far as interpretation of the results, I'm wondering if perhaps it's a little bit too... Can we lose the stream? No. Okay. I think he's still there. Okay. Okay, Josh, can you hear me?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, it's just our screen is off. I appreciate that you've identified number 23 in addition to the two that you said were not accepted. You identified 23, but I think that there's some others that I'd be really hesitant to interpret it as positive results when there's been less than 50% in agreement. And I'm pointing out, in addition to 23, number 37, 45, 47, 53. So I guess my question is as you move forward, do you take into account where there's limited support to perhaps shy away from an area or alter it to meet the concerns?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Crosso. That's a good question. The short answer is absolutely. We want to do a check-in at the stage with what we call the strategies, because those are really just the high-level directions this can take and some of the tools we could use. So doing a check-in at this point means we can understand where that community sentiment is, and that is not as simple, of course, as what we have to summarize and report out, where we say, well, did this question get 50% support or was it 60? We can have the nuance behind that and say, okay, where was the key level of concern? This one seems mixed on the feedback. Layer in our lens of what we heard through our open-ended feedback, the comments we received, our in-person interactions to understand. In opposition to this, is it about cost and funding? Or is it about changing of character? Or is it about some other concern? And what is that? Can we make changes to address those concerns? So we will go through, and we are going through each of those with a fine-tooth comb to see, well, as we're going to draft this actual document, how can we make it better and try to increase that support so it's more reflective of the broader community?
Great. So the draft area redevelopment plan that will be put out to the community, which will happen before it even comes to council, that should be reflective of this feedback.
Generally speaking, yes. I mean, I think it's important to point out when we're doing community plans, we don't take a referendum on the direction something is going. There's certain realities that we operate within. We have council-approved documents and strategies that we have to align with. We have realities around ways we can provide affordable housing, ways we can actually help improve the function of the streets and reduce congestion. That may not always reflect a majority community sentiment, but we look at that community sentiment to say, well, is this the optimal way still, or are there better ways we can do this, or alternative ways we can achieve that end result? In some cases, absolutely, we might be able to pivot, and we're going to look at opportunities to do that. In other ways, due to the realities and our constraints or our jurisdictional controls, we might not be able to. But the key approach we would take is at least identifying that and sharing with the community, why did we or why did we not make a change based on what we heard?
Great, thank you. Councillor Mera.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Carnes, for your report. I just had one question regarding the survey from who we heard from, I mean. I noticed if you own or operate a business that's within downtown Canmore or outside downtown Canmore, but there was no, that I could see, and maybe I missed it, when it was asking about the residencies, but there was no spot for live in the area or live outside of the ARP area.
Yes, thanks for flagging that, Councillor Mera. It's hard to recall, of course, in a large survey like that, all the exact questions we asked, so I would have to go back on it. But yeah, I think my understanding is correct. So for the businesses, we asked, do you own or operate a business within Canmore's downtown, outside Canmore's downtown, outside Canmore? For residents, we broke it down by municipality. So Canmore, outside Canmore, such as Banff, Municipal District of Bighorn, Calgary, and so on. Part of that is privacy concerns, and we've gone through that in the past. So we don't typically ask for people to say disclose like a postal code and actually ground truth their place of residence, but also acknowledging that changes we make downtown impact the broader residents as well beyond it. Many temporarily live downtown, they permanently live downtown, they might visit downtown on a daily basis for their commercial needs. So wanting to get the touch point with the population, but we didn't actually ask yet. Postal code or anything like that to identify a street that they live on.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
Councillor Ma.
And thank you, Mr. Cairns, for all this engagement that's been happening so far. A couple general questions. I think Mayor Crouser kind of touched upon it a bit, but for example, some of the more contentious strategies, such as Strategy 33, which is the levels of story heights, will there be opportunity to get a little more perhaps granular or prescriptive with some of these concepts? For example, like I feel free stories in some spots is interesting, but how that's implemented could have a way. Or another general question, because I'm not a planner, at what level do concepts such as architectural control start to filter through? Because sometimes you say words like character, and like, how do you preserve the character? And I actually don't know what that means exactly when we say that. So anything there would be helpful too.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ma. So that's a good point. When we have the draft plan, there will be more specificity around that. I think some of the challenges that we encounter when you engage with this process and try to do a bit of an earlier check-in before having a full plan is some members of the community on a topic like this say, well, I need to know more to be able to provide a response. Like, I want to understand the nuance behind it. And then when you're trying to engage the other half of the population, this is too much information on too complex of a topic. So that's why we have this check-in. We can't satisfy both sides of the coin in that respect, but when we move into the area plan phase, that's where those residents that want to have that level of nuance will be able to see that and actually provide that feedback.
Okay, so we're kind of going from 20,000 feet and we're getting to like
Exactly.
10,000 foot, but there will be time to like talk at the 10,000 foot level as we get closer. Okay, because some of those ideas are more abstract for me as I try to wrap my head around them. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's correct. Traditionally, we would move into a public hearing for council consideration of it, but we want to give the community an opportunity to have a full review of that entire ARP prior to that. As a final checkpoint to just make sure there are any last minute changes we want to make before bringing this to the council and going through the processes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, looking to council to see if there are any other questions. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a little bit more of a granular one, but it tweaked in my mind when you were making your presentation, Mr. Cairns. When are the utilities due for Main Street? This might be a...
Yeah, Councillor Graham, I don't have the exact year before me, but the assumed end of life would be in the 2030s.
Thank you very much.
Councillor McCallum.
I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to compliment the department and communications on this rollout of public consultation, because it is very different than any public consultation we have had in the past. I really feel as though these folks, well, just the warm up and the cool down that happened over the winter, that was a lot of fun. And I know that a lot of the public really enjoyed that non-confrontational style of being curious and staying curious. So I wanted to compliment the department on that, and I just really felt that you had an opportunity to scratch a bit at the nooks and crannies and to flip the concepts over a bit, especially in those in-person opportunities. And the numbers speak for themselves. There were quite a few interactions, whether positive or negative. There were interactions, and that's what we want. We want people to tell us how they feel, and hopefully not shielded behind other fears. And I think that they did a good job of that. So thank you. Thank you to the department and yourself, sir.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Good point. One last request to see if there's any further questions. With that, yes, I just want to echo those sentiments. A lot of really great work done here. I'm loving these what we heard reports and the amount of engagement. And I look forward to how this gets refined and then puts out to the community again for further feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
All right. Somebody really needs to deal with their car. All right, so I will move now to, actually, I'm feeling like I need a 5-minute break. Let's just take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish the rest of the agenda. Let me know when we're back. Okay, we're back. We're now moving to item E1, Councillor updates. I'll just open it up. Does anybody have any questions with respect to any of the updates? Give you a moment to flip through to look for any notes. Okay. Councillor McCallum.
I have seen that you've done a few of these Canmore Young Adult Network meet and greet type of things, situationships over the last year, which is awesome. Outside of housing, what is the number one concern or issue or topic that comes up amongst?
Great question. I let the conversations go where they will, but it
Yes.
tends to all be around housing and affordability.
Yes.
And a lot of it is also learning about process. Some people aren't exactly certain how things can't come to be and why we can't just do X or something like that. And some of it is, well, you know, that's not within the municipal jurisdiction, that's a provincial thing, or federal thing. If it's within the town, this is how it works, and so there's that component too. But vast majority is all about housing and affordability.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, good question. Any other questions? No. Just looking to Mr. Stiver. Are we broadcasting? I don't see it on the screen.
Yes, we are. It's just not on the projector for reasons, but we are live streaming currently.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Just helps me to know where the camera's pointing. All right, any other questions with regards to councillor updates? Okay, seeing none, let's move. Oh, another one.
Oh, like
Councillor
questioning.
McCallum.
Councillor Faubert. I noticed that in your report, you speak to the fact that Kelly Gibson came to speak to the commission about meeting Rome's future needs for repair and maintenance services. So what is the process or the, I don't know if solution's the right word to use. What will you guys do moving forward to address this concern?
So we have a strategic plan coming out as well, and so part of that strategic plan will include work to identify where and what level of repair and maintenance services we need, whether and options in-house versus contracting out.
So does that mean that, like, are they going to be like cutting off service, or it's like this is it, this is the last bus we can work on based on the staffing complement we have?
It's not, they didn't give notice in the sense that there is a hard end date, but they did make it clear that the future, like moving into the future, the ability for them to absorb more work is limited.
Yes.
So as we have new buses coming on and we increase our fleet every year, that affects us. But one of the other things that we'll see in the proposed Rome budget is a new position, a manager who is in-house at the Rome Operations Center, who is in charge of managing the maintenance program, as well as doing small maintenance items like windshield wipers, things that you don't need a heavy-duty mechanic being paid X amount of money an hour to do. And oftentimes, some of the little things were being missed as well because of the amount of work that.
They're trying to absorb, yeah.
And it's, the other part is just, is supplies, part supply. So we have 11 different kinds of buses from 6 different manufacturers, and in order to keep an inventory of parts for all those different things requires an investment of money to just have that stock on hand, and it's not something that the town of Banff is able to do for Rome. I don't even think Rome even realized until more recently that our fleet makeup has put us at risk of being able to keep up with repair and maintenance, and then COVID and supply chain, and you got a situation where a plan is needed to take us into the future, because what we have done to now has worked, but our future, it won't work. Our future's too big for what we have in place now.
Right, and so they will then, I'm guessing, be looking for land base in the future.
And I think that the Dillon service review for Canmore even identified a future location for our bus storage for 22 buses. I don't recall if that identified like repair and maintenance as part of that compound, but I think that locations for us as Canmore for where our buses will go in the future, especially with the full build out of our community, is definitely on the radar. So
Thank you very much.
I don't know if Mayor Krauser.
No, you covered everything that I would have mentioned, so thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move to item F1, the administrative update. First of all, dealing with Section A, Corporate Strategic Team. Any questions in this regard? Okay, moving to item B, Municipal Services. C, Corporate Services. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, Your Worship. Question regarding protective services. There's a part here of the paid parking revenue being lower due to later implementation of the new zones. How long was the time lag for that we expected versus reality? Was it a couple months, couple weeks?
So I'm not entirely sure I understand the question.
It just says like paid parking revenue was lower, and one of the reasons why was later implementation of the new parking zones than planned.
Are you in the financial section?
Yeah. in the
Okay, sorry,
corporate services
I was
finance.
sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, I wasn't there. Yep, okay.
Sorry.
It's okay, sorry, taking me a second.
My
But
bad.
yes, great question. Okay, so the issue here was the switch to the reduced rate, and that happened almost immediately after council approved it,
Yep.
so there was no delay.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
And then the new zones was, like, I'm thinking like, say by the boat launch and stuff?
that's right. And that was several months delay.
Oh, and that was other, just like supply chain, getting
Yep.
that stuff? Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Yeah.
Any further questions on Section C, Corporate Services? Under D, Municipal Infrastructure. I did have a question around the work that's being done on Bow Valley Trail. And I'm very excited for when it opens up. I see that there is some cement pouring still to be done. And I was wondering, is there a timeline? Like, do we anticipate that getting all done before like this season, or like we must be getting really close because of just the year?
Yeah, a hard date, no, because it is somewhat weather dependent, but the plan was still mid-October, so right around now it should be wrapping up.
Okay, so probably pouring is happening in the next short while,
Yeah.
hopefully. Okay, crossing fingers for weather to support that. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions around D, municipal infrastructure? Councillor McCallum.
I had a comment, and that was with regards to item 4A about parks, the conclusion of several seasonal workers, et cetera, et cetera. Town looked beautiful this year, and I just wanted to reach out to all of the staff that work their backsides off to make our community, to dust off the dust of winter and to make it beautiful in summer and then tuck it in for bed for winter again. So thank you all. I got to see them in the lunchroom sometimes. Yeah.
Can I just say thank you very much for that, and also it takes a community to keep a community looking beautiful. So while I appreciate that there are some Parks frontline staff out there, there's a whole host of other services supporting that at the town, including HR, finance, IT, and the list goes on and on and on. So it's very much a town-wide effort.
So you're saying it takes a village to raise a village?
Yes.
Excellent.
I was trying to riff on that.
Yeah. Councillor Hillstad.
Thank you. I think at the end of section 4D there, water theft. I gotta know, like, are we gonna find more information about what exactly course we choose to go with this later on? I've never seen this one before.
Yeah, it does happen occasionally. We can perhaps provide a little more detail. I'm not really sure how much of that we'd be making publicly available, but I can certainly ask Mr. Camo to put together a bit more information on how often we see this, what the town's course of action is, and what do we do for kind of prevention to discourage this type of behavior.
Thank you.
Councillor Mara.
I too just had a comment on 4A for parks. I went up and saw the new columbarium, and I think it's a job well done. So.
Excellent. Any other questions on anything in the administrative update? All right. Anything arising with regards to the council resolution action list or the correspondence? Seeing none, I will then move that we adjourn. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, everyone.